Hello everyone and welcome to today's Key Action 2 question and answer webinar to support you with your 2020 applications. So my name is Laura Martin Simpson and I'm joined today by Marie Durbin and El Wahid Mohammed, and we're all from the customer services team. So today we'll be covering Key Action 2 strategic partnerships, and we'll also be able to answer questions via the chat facility throughout the webinar. So just in terms of the software that we're using, the Zoom tool allows you to submit questions via the chat button available on your attendee control panel, which should appear at the bottom of your screen. Now, as the control panel provides other navigating tools, we just like to ask you not to use any of those. We've muted your microphones and switched off your cameras, so you shouldn't need to have to do this yourself. Please note that any questions that you submit are visible to all participants. When it comes to your questions, if possible, please ask questions relevant to the entire audience and try to avoid project-specific questions. So at the end of the presentation, or even at the end of specific sections, we'll pick up the questions that we believe are most relevant to the entire audience and share the answers with you. If we're not able to answer all your questions before our time is up, we will email you the answers ASAP. We'll also send you the slides and links to other resources by the end of this week. Okay, so before we start, we just want to run a quick poll. Can you hear us okay? If you could answer, that would be really great. Okay, brilliant. That is good to know. So we'll start. So I'm just going to show you, here is today's agenda, and we've picked out some key topics which we usually receive a number of queries about. So for each point, I'll provide a quick summary, and we'll then pause to allow time for you to type any questions you have on a topic via the chat facility. And as I said, I'll also send out a follow-up email with key links to our application guidance and other useful links and documents. Please be advised that we are unable to give specific project advice. So the main objective of this is to ensure that you complete the application form accurately and to ensure that you request the correct amount of funding. We are able to provide some examples of best practice in regard to narrative sections on the form. The Erasmus Plus applications are assessed independently by external experts, so we're unable to guarantee that your application will be successful. The deadline for Key Action 2 school funding is Tuesday, the 24th of March 2020 at 11 AM UK time. This deadline is set by the European Commission and is applicable across Europe. It is really important to submit your application well in advance of this deadline. We cannot accept late applications, so anything submitted after 11 AM UK time, even if it's just like a couple of seconds, will be considered late and ineligible. Considering that this deadline is applicable to all sectors of the Erasmus Plus programme, the UK National Agency will be extremely busy in the lead up to this day. So by submitting early, you do allow yourself enough time to contact us and for us to have time to support you to rectify any issues you may be having. Please don't leave it until the last minute to submit your application. Now, should you encounter any technical issues with the online application form, please take a screenshot and email us immediately, as we do require evidence to report any technical issue. And also, if you do have issues, please do keep trying to submit your form right up until the deadline. Okay, so Key Action 2 strategic partnerships. So the projects supported under this key action are expected to bring positive and long-lasting effects on the participating organisations, on the policy systems in which such actions are framed, as well as on the organisations and persons directly and or indirectly involved in the organised activities. The key action is expected to result in the development, transfer and/or implementation of innovative practices at organisational, local, regional, national or European levels. So the objectives of all joint initiatives should include cooperation, peer learning and exchanges of experience. So strategic partnerships in the school education field are divided into two different categories. So we've got Key Action 229, which is school exchange partnerships. So this is for projects that only involve schools. There must be a minimum of 2 partner schools in 2 different countries, and you can have a maximum of 6 partner schools involved. Key Action 201 is strategic partnerships for school education. All projects must have a minimum of 3 partner organisations from 3 different countries. Now, projects within KA201 can be cross-sectoral, and Key Action 201 is split into 2 different themes. So you've got innovation and exchange of good practice. It's really important that you're aware of this and apply for the appropriate theme for your project. When you are on the application portal, you will be asked if you're applying for innovation or exchange of good practice. Please make sure that you choose the right one, as from there on in the application, the questions and budgets are different. So first, we'll go through the principles that apply to all Key Action 2 projects, and then we'll focus on some specific characteristics. So this slide shows the specific aims for each type of Key Action 2, which are outlined in the 2020 programme guide and are linked to the objectives set by the European Commission. All the different projects within Key Action 2 are expected to meet certain outcomes, which I'll list now, to a varying extent, depending on the size and objectives of the project. So we've got to develop innovative approaches, to create a more modern, dynamic, committed and professional environment inside the organisation, which will integrate good practices and new methods into daily activities, and to increase capacity and professionalism to work at EU or international level. It's really important to make sure that your application is relevant to your own organisation and to the needs of your organisation. It's also very important to make sure that your applications show how your project is linked to the Erasmus Plus priorities and objectives for Key Action 2. So you need to explicitly link your own school needs to the Erasmus Plus priorities right from the planning stage. So here's a list of the countries that can participate in the Erasmus Plus programme. The programme countries are those who belong to the EU and also include former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, Iceland, Norway, Liechtenstein, Turkey, Serbia and the UK. All strategic partnerships must involve a minimum of partners from programme countries, but some types of Key Action 2 projects, you might also be able to involve organisations from partner countries. A list of these countries can be found in pages 22 to 24 of the programme guide. We'll go into more detail later as to which projects can involve organisations from partner countries. All Key Action 2 projects will need to address at least one horizontal or field-specific priority. So you can see here a list of the horizontal priorities which stretch across all Key Action 2 projects. Again, you'll find the full definition of each priority on page 100 of the 2020 programme guide. Here you can see a list of the school education field-specific priorities. You can also find the full definition of these on page 103 of the programme guide. You must make sure that your project fully addresses the field of school education. And as I said before, you need to explicitly link your own school needs to the Erasmus Plus priorities right from the beginning. So the first type of project that we'll cover is school exchange partnerships, known as KA229. Only schools can participate under this key action. This type of project aims to increase the school's capacity to work internationally, share and explore new teaching and learning methods, enrich the curriculum. With this type of project, you can carry out short and long-term mobility of students and also short and long-term mobility of staff. Now, depending on the type of activity, the duration will vary. So for short-term mobilities, the duration can be as little as 3 days, which is not including travel days, and as long as 2 months. For long-term mobilities of students, this can range from 2 to 36 months. And for long-term mobility of staff, this can range from 2 to 12 months. So in order to be eligible for funding, all school exchange partnership projects should be transnational. So this means that at least 2 schools from 2 different programme countries should be involved in the project. All partnerships must have a minimum of 2 partners and a maximum of 6. All activities must also be transnational, and there will be a lead organisation who will apply for funding for all of the partners. However, it's really important to point out that if successful, the lead organisation will not be responsible for the entire budget. So each partner school will receive its own budget from its respective national agency. All projects must last between 12 and 24 months. However, as I said previously, if you intend to include long-term mobility of students, your project could last up to 36 months. Funding is capped at €16,500 per year and per participating school. So whilst this is the formula to calculate the total funding, the funding doesn't need to be split equally. So for example, if 2 schools apply for the maximum amount of funding for a 1-year project, they would apply for €33,000, but this could be split as a 20,000 and 30,000, for example, depending on each school's activities. The second type of project that we'll cover is strategic partnerships in the field of school education, also known as KA201. The partners within these projects can be cross-sector, and within this type of project, there are 2 variations. So you've got strategic partnerships supporting innovation. Now, these projects focus on creating new tools and resources that will be widely disseminated within the field. Or you have strategic partnerships supporting exchange of good practice. And these projects focus on sharing good practice with different organisations within the partnerships to upskill staff to tackle the partnership's shared needs. And again, just to reiterate, depending on which type of project you decide to carry out, the questions on the application form will be different, so do make sure you're applying for the right one. So in order to take part in strategic partnerships in the field of school education, partnerships should be at least 3 organisations from different programme countries. Now, whilst the organisations from partner countries can be included, full justification should be provided as to why they should be involved and what they will contribute to the project. Now, the organisations involved can work in different fields of education, but the biggest impact should be on the school education field. You can find more information as to which organisations are eligible on page 107 of the programme guide. So the lead organisation will apply for funding on behalf of the whole partnership. Therefore, you should make sure that you're applying for the funding that yourself and all your partners will need. All these types of projects must last between 12 and 36 months. And whilst there is no maximum size of the partnership, the funding for project management and implementation is capped at the equivalent amount for 10 partners. Again, you can find more information about eligibility criteria on pages 107 to 110 of the programme guide. Now we're going to take a look at funding. It's very important to remember some few points here. The narrative sections and budget sections of the application form are separate. So you need to give as much detail and justification for the budget as you do for the narrative. And please make sure you ask for all the money that you need. Whatever the final figure is in the application is the maximum amount that can be given. And again, remember that you're applying for all of your partners' budgets as well as your own. So for all Key Action 2 strategic partnerships, the project grant is a contribution to the costs of delivering the project and may not cover all costs involved. So at the top here, all projects will have requested funding under project management and implementation. And now the budget is a lump sum grant to support the cost of managing and being involved in the project, smaller scale activities such as project websites and all dissemination costs. Project management and implementation is calculated based on the number of partners and the duration of the project. Now, one of the costs that can be covered under this budget category is supply cover for schools. However, we do encourage you to arrange the activities in a way that would minimise the cost of supply cover, as the funding really should be used to maximise the impact of the project and the dissemination of the project. Cross-sector projects, so for those applying for KA2 can also request funding for transnational project meetings to support the participating countries in meeting up to discuss the project and plan project activities. However, this budget is not available for school exchange partnerships. This grant is calculated on the base of a unit cost per participant to cover travel and subsistence, with a different unit cost for short and long distance travel. So supporting innovation projects in KA2 may request additional budget items such as intellectual outputs funding, which is a contribution associated with tangible deliverables, which must be innovative, high quality, and have potential for wider dissemination and exploitation. So examples of tangible outputs could include apps, handbooks, curricula, pedagogical materials, open education resources, and IT tools. Multiplier events. This funding is only available to supporting innovation projects which plan to develop intellectual outputs. So this funding supports the dissemination of the intellectual outputs produced by the project beyond the immediate project partners and beneficiaries. So this funding should be used to promote finished intellectual outputs, and therefore you should consider when you'll be able to deliver these events. The three budget headings shown here are available for all types of strategic partnerships where required and justified within the application. Exceptional costs and special needs. So support budget items are calculated on the basis of a percentage of the estimated actual costs. In both cases, the need for the costs must be fully explained and justified within the application. So where insufficient justification is provided, the requested costs may not be approved. Now, it is possible for projects to include learning, teaching and training activities where these are embedded within broader project objectives and will support the achievement of these. So where these activities are planned and justified, funding is available to co-finance travel, which is based on distance band, or where you apply for exceptional costs for expensive travel where they are justified. There are a number of specific rules and criteria which apply to each budget item. So it is really important to refer to the detailed budget guidance in pages 115 to 123 of the programme guide. And as I said before, you need to justify each budget category. So we'll now cover a range of information that should support you when completing your application and provide you with information on how to strengthen your application. Before we do that, we're just going to have a quick poll. Could you let us know if you've read the Key Action 2 schools assessment criteria? Okay, that's really useful to know. So it's about 50-50 there. So we recommend that you check the quality criteria that our external experts will use when assessing your application. We also recommend that you read the guide for external experts, which is published on our website. Now, this provides further information in regards to the criteria the external experts will use. So before applying for funding, it's really important to understand how your project will be assessed. You will then be able to ensure that your proposal meets the requirements. So please note that all applications need to score a minimum of 60 to be considered funding, as well as at least half of the points in each criteria. Now, Erasmus Plus funding is competitive, and therefore we do recommend that you always try to put the best application that you can forward. So when completing your application form, you need to provide as much detail as possible and make everything obvious to the external expert who will be assessing your application. So you need to explicitly state things rather than suggest or presume that the assessor will know things about the school or project. So when completing your application form for Key Action 2 funding, it's important to take into account the assessment criteria as outlined on pages 110 to 112 of the programme guide. So applications will be assessed against these criteria, so make sure you address all of them in your application. And as I said before, to be considered for funding, proposals must score at least 60 points. Furthermore, they must score at least half of the maximum points in each of the categories of the awarded criteria mentioned above. So we've got the minimum 15 points for the categories relevance of the project and impact and dissemination, and 20 points for the category quality of the project design and implementation. We also recommend that you read the 2020 guide for external experts published on the Erasmus Plus UK website, because this will just provide you further detail as to how your application will be assessed. Now, the external experts will review the experience and expertise of the organisations within the partnerships. So therefore, you need to make sure that your partners have the necessary expertise to carry out your project. You will also need to ensure that all partners have roles to fulfil and try to make the division of roles as even as possible. You'll need to make sure that everyone is aware of what you've applied for and what they're expected to do throughout the project. Now, your application can only be assessed based on the information that you have provided, and you should make sure that your application is detailed and focused. So the more information you provide whilst keeping it focused, the easier it will be for the external experts to fully understand your process and for you to demonstrate that you've thought the project through. Be realistic in terms of members of staff that can travel at the same time or the scale of your objectives. You know, can you realistically achieve your objectives in that 12 or 24 months that your project might last? The forms for the Key Action 2 applications are available, and therefore we do recommend that you start working on these as soon as possible in order to ensure that you have enough time to fully complete the application and to ensure that you submit ahead of the deadline. We also strongly recommend that you prepare your application in a Word document prior to filling in the online form. You can now see on the screen a number of points that you should consider when writing your application's narrative. So please note that these are some indicative points and that obviously you should at all times endeavour to answer fully the questions presented on the application form. Here you can see some other points that you might want to consider when preparing to apply. What's also important to cover is how you will manage any risk. You can see here some of the advice we give to prospective applicants based on common feedback that the assessors have given in the past. So we've got, give as much detail as possible. Again, don't assume that the assessor knows your school or your reasons why, so justify everything. Keep it focused. So each written section has a maximum character count, and that includes spaces. You can use a STAR method to help keep focus, so situation, task, action, result, or intended result. And constantly link the activities back to your project and Erasmus Plus objectives and aims, and make those connections throughout your application. Demonstrate good value for money and proofread. So if you can give it to someone to read who knows nothing about the project or who doesn't work in the field of education, that is brilliant. You know, does that person understand your intended project and the reasons why? And you need to demonstrate that the project has been thoroughly planned as a whole. So the breakdown of the activities can be carried out and the preparation has been carried out or will be carried out. Full consideration as to the distribution of roles, project activities to be carried out within each school, and any other stages specific to your project. So on the screen, you can see some of the aspects you might want to consider when thinking about your project's impact. So we recommend that you assess and use the resources developed by the UK National Agency to support you, and those can be found on our website. Impact assessment is an essential part of an Erasmus Plus project, as it evaluates achievements and generates recommendations for future improvement. The Erasmus Plus programme has clear objectives and desired outcomes ever since the global economic crisis in 2008, when public sector finances in member states across Europe have been under pressure. So it's extremely vital that we all demonstrate the purpose and value of money for public spending. It's vital that your project has impact and that it is detailed within your application. And please remember that you can have small as well as big impacts. The results of the project may be of a diverse nature and consist of both concrete or tangible results as well as skills and personal experiences. So you should consider how you'll measure these results, and particularly those which are intangible, because they are harder to measure and record. You need to measure impact throughout the whole project. So one way of doing this is to incorporate impact analysis within lesson delivery. And this means it's not as much extra work and you're able to evaluate the impact throughout the project. Most important thing to remember to disseminate effectively is to have a plan. So 6 questions to remember is why, what, how, when, whom, and where. Make sure to identify the targets, methods, and frequency of dissemination, as well as to what will be disseminated. So what is your message, as well as how are you going to get that message across? You should refer to your dissemination plan in your application and relate this to the impact of your project and deliverables. So that's quite a lot of information there. So we'll pause now for 2 minutes or so to see if you've got any questions on any other topics that we've just covered. So please use the questions facilities to ask away. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to carry on, but please do. So we're going to cover the important things you need to do before beginning to complete the application form. So please note that the organisation ID has replaced the PIC as the unique identifier for an organisation to apply. So organisations who have previously applied for Erasmus Plus funding will have a PIC and will have been automatically assigned an organisation ID. You can use the organisation registration system, which we'll show you in a second, via the link on this slide to check an organisation ID, as well as change some of the information linked to it. If you haven't made an application before, don't worry. You can also use the organisation registration system to register a new organisation. So once you have access to your organisation identification, you will need to upload these two documents to the organisation registration system. So please note that the financial identification form will need to be either stamped by the bank or you'll need to include a bank statement. Now, the bank statement can have any sensitive information redacted. However, we will need to be able to see the name of the organisation, the address and the bank account on it. You can find further instruction on how to complete these documents when you're downloading them. So on the screen here, you have a list of the documents that you'll need to submit or upload, or at least have at the time of submitting your application. And for Key Action 201, you'll also need the mandate signing at the point of application. So you'll then be able to access the online application forms. We'll send you a link to the forms when we send the follow-up email from the webinar. Please note that if you're applying for strategic partnerships for school education, you will need to select as part of the application form if your project supports innovation or the exchanges of good practice, as I've said before. Please also remember that as a tip, we recommend that you prepare or at least have a copy of your application on Word document. So now we'll just have a look at the application form online. Now, the individual guides for KA201 and KA229 applicants will be on the Erasmus Plus website, and they give you details on how to complete the various stages of the application form. There will also be two specific YouTube videos detailing a step-by-step guide on the two different Key Action 2 application forms, and we'll send you a link after the webinar. But we just want to show you the form now and go over some points which are applicable to both KA201 and KA229. So on the screen, I'm going to go into KA229 application form, but we'll go through the parts that are the same for Key Action 201. So just a couple of general points to note. The form automatically saves every 2 seconds. You'll see the mandatory fields are marked in red and they need to be filled in before you're able to submit the form. If a section is marked with a warning sign, this means that either there is some information missing or not inputted correctly. So most individual questions will be marked in the same way to make it easy to identify and fix the issues. As I said before, we do highly recommend that you have a copy of your application answers. So for example, if you use a Word document, it means that should there be any technical issues with the application form or internet connection, we really don't want you to lose your work and have to start all over again. If at any point whilst filling out the form you encounter any technical issues, please take a screenshot and notify us immediately by email. So we'll have a look at this form. Please check the details on the top right of the form to check that you're filling out the correct form. On the left, you'll see the various stages of the application form you'll need to complete. So I've gone through and completed a few of these sections just to give you an example. So you can see here there's indicators in the shape of green ticks to show me where I've completed a section, and you can then move on to the next section. If there's a red triangle next to a section, there's something missing or the information needs to be inputted in a slightly different way. So first section here is context, where you'll need to enter your project title and start date. By selecting that field, you can see it's giving us a calendar to my application. So a schools exchange partnership can last between 12 and 36 months, and the project start date must be between the 1st of September 2020 and the 31st of September 2020. So I've just selected a date. And now you can see if I select the duration of my project, it has given me an end date. Then you simply select your language, which will be English. You'll need to scroll down and select your national agency, which will presumably be UK01, which is British Council in this case. And so then we can go to select participating organisations. So your organisation, as well as your partner organisations, will need an organisation ID. Now, the system has completely changed this year, as I said, and everyone applying will need to obtain an OID. So I'm just going to show you quickly the organisation registration system website, just to show you this is what it looks like. So as you can see on the initial landing page, you can obtain an organisation ID if you already have a PIC, or you can enter alternative information such as the organisation name and search for your OID that way. If your organisation is applying for Erasmus Plus funding for the first time, then you simply click on register my organisation here and follow the process from there. More detailed guidance on the organisation registration system can, as always, be found on our website. So let's go back to the application form. Bear with me a second. There we go. Okay, so once you've entered your OID there, you can click on your legal name to go to fill in further details about your organisation. And if I scroll down and I go to associated persons, you've got your legal representative and your contact person. So your legal representative will be the authorised person from your organisation who will be able to sign documentation such as your individual grant agreement. Your contact person will be the person who the national agency would predominantly be in touch with, and vice versa. So these would normally be people who we would contact throughout the year, not just in term time. So if at any stage during your application or project, your legal rep or named contact person changes, you need to get in touch with the national agency immediately to let us know, and then we can update the relevant details for you. Now, it's very important to remember we can only speak to a legal representative or named contact person regarding an application or project. So it's very important that this information is kept up to date. If you want more than one contact person, that's absolutely fine, but you'll just have to note who is your preferred contact person, and this would be the national agency's first port to call if we need to get in touch with you. So if I'm just going to click on the legal representative just to show you what it looks like. And here you go, you'll need to fill all that information in, and you can see these red sections indicate that that information is mandatory. So just make sure all that information is correct. So we can move back then through the application, and we can scroll down to background and experience. This is a narrative section. So you can see there's a few bullet points outlining what's expected here, but also, as previously mentioned, please refer to our guidance or written guidance for further detail on how to complete the narrative sections. As you can see, it shows you how many characters you've got and updates as you enter the information. And remember, the character count includes spaces. Once you've completed all those details, they should all go green. You'll then need to go back and go through the same process or entering all the details for your partner schools. So once you're happy with all those initial details are complete, you'll then just start making your way down through the different sections down the left-hand side. So if we go to project description, so you need to select the appropriate priorities and topics from the drop-down menu. There are then some narrative sections you'll need to fill in. Please be aware also that the character count is indicative of the expected size of answer for each box there. And once you've done all that, you can then go down to management. Again, these are narrative sections that you need to go through and complete. And once you've finished that, you can go to learning, teaching and training. Now, activities for both KA201 and KA229, you will be asked if you plan to include transnational activities. If you say yes, you'll then need to complete the narrative, and then we can add what activities we want to complete as part of this project. So, see, I've just sort of added some here. I'm going to click add activity, and then the button on the right for details, just to show you what you need to input. And you can see then you fill in the details accordingly. Now, if I scroll down a little bit further, then you'll see here a summary of groups of participants. And actually, if I go back one and pick up an activity that I've already inputted, there we go. I'll scroll down. Here we go. So you need to request funding for the activity. So once you put in your activity, you go click on it like that. And you need to request individual support. So as you can see, I've entered some information here. The total is worked out automatically by the number of participants requiring a grant. And this is a case of you working through and making sure you're being as accurate as possible. Again, here I've entered an example. And as you can see, this calculates per participant and overall total. So just slowly work your way through whatever is appropriate for your proposal. Travel, by clicking on the link provided here, this will take you to the distance travel calculator. So this is where you'll need to input your starting point of the activity and the return point, which will then give you the correct distance bands that you'll need to apply for. So use this tool, don't use Google. And you've got exceptional costs for expensive travel. So this is where instead of using travel bands, if you're traveling from or to a remote area, which requires additional travel, then you fill that in. Once you've done all that, you can go to timetable. So as you can see, any activities entered under learning, teaching and training activities will automatically populate this section. So it creates a timetable with the dates that have already been entered within the application form. Once you've checked all that, you can go to special costs. So special needs support, these are costs directly related to participants with special needs. So you'll need to enter the amount of participants, the justification and the amount you're applying for. You can add more special costs by simply clicking add and repeating that process. And then we'll go on the left-hand side to follow up. This is another narrative section that you'll need to complete. Once you've done that, you can then go to budget summary. Now, it's really important to look really thoroughly through this, because this is your chance to review the information you've entered up until this point and to ensure that every financial aspect of your project has been considered. So the budget summary is broken down into activity type to make it easier to review. We always recommend reviewing to make sure you've applied for everything required for your proposal. Ensure under your budget summary that matches what you want to apply for. And remember, you will not be able to receive additional funding retrospectively. So the budget summary is followed by the project summary. And here you need to, the initial details Oh yeah, so you need to input your information here, following the guidance given. Once you've completed the summary, you can then move to annexes. So in this section, it's really important that you download the Declaration of Honour. So I'm just going to download it now and share it to you. Show it, sorry. So your legal representative should read carefully through this document, and once they're happy with it, and they're happy with the application that you're putting forward, they will need to complete the bottom of the document. So just to point a few things out, place, they'll need to write either the name or of the city or town where your organisation is based, and where this document is being signed. So for example, in this case, they would write Cardiff. They'll need to write the date. The UK National Agency doesn't require a national ID number, so please just leave this blank. In the case of stamps, if your organisation doesn't have a stamp, please just write not applicable. Most important thing here is signatures must be original at the point of signing, and then scanned. So we can't accept electronic signatures. So please bear in mind that you'll need to print this document, get it signed, scanned and uploaded. So do have this document prepared in good time. So once you've scanned your Declaration of Honour, you can then upload it by pressing the Add Declaration of Honour button. Oh, bear with me. Let me just get back to the application form. So I'll give it one more go and then carry on. Sorry, this is me, not the computer. Oh yeah, there we go. Right, so once we've signed that, uploaded it, then you can add Declaration of Honour. There we go. Now you can also share your application, and you'll need to enter the details of who you want to share your application with and the level of access you want them to have. It's very important here with the sharing. It will warn you on the screen, or bear with, that's a different warning. It will tell you that you will not be able to submit the application whilst it is open with somebody else that you're sharing it with. So just make sure that you're the only one on the application form when you are intending to submit. And that's it really for the application. You can go through an application checklist. We recommend that you download the PDF version before you hit submit. Go through the checklist, make sure that you tick the data protection box. You'll not be able to submit the application before all the mandatory fields are completed. Okay, so as I said, more detail about each application. There is a video which will be published on YouTube at the end of this week, and I will send you the link to that. So just to finish up on, we're just going to go through any other opportunities, because you'll be asked in your application form whether you're planning on using some tools in connection with your project. So here, there's a range of opportunities on offer for schools, so including platforms on where to look for partner organisations or to disseminate your project. So we're just going to cover a few of these that might support you with your Key Action 2 application. So you've got School Education Gateway. So this is a European portal called School Education Gateway, which is a great website aimed primarily at school teachers across Europe. It provides clear information on education initiatives across Europe. And as I said, primarily aimed at teachers and school staff, as well as experts and organisations working in the education sector. Now, existing eTwinning logins can be used to access the School Gateway. You can also use this page to find partners for your Key Action 2 project ideas. eTwinning is a free online community for schools in Europe, which allows you to find partners and collaborate on projects. eTwinning is active in over 43 countries and 25 languages, and over 300,000 teachers are registered on eTwinning. So there's no application process, and it is a safe environment to help you find partners. eTwinning complements Erasmus Plus really well, and you will be asked to comment on this in your application form. You can use eTwinning to start to collaborate and grow and extend your school project. You can also use it to prepare outgoing staff and as a tool for impact and dissemination. Europass is a way to recognise the skills learned and acquired by those taking part in a mobility activity, and it's free to use. So it's formed by 5 different documents that make these skills and qualifications easily understood across Europe. So what should you do next? Remember, there are certain steps to follow and prepare ahead of your application. So make sure that you are able to access and edit your OID, and that those responsible for signing legal documents in your school will be available to sign the application form and any other documents that might require your signature. Check our guidance and make the most of the opportunities on offer to put forward the strongest application possible. We are here to help you, so make sure you contact us with any questions. Submit ahead of the deadline, as I said, we're not able to accept any late submissions. So the 2020 online application forms are accessible from many different sites, such as from the UK National Agency's website, of the European Commission's website. Whichever way you choose, you'll land on the same application portal. Now, an EU login will be required to access the portal. If you already have your access to Mobility Tool, you can use the same logins. If not, don't worry, it will prompt you to create your own personal login. And as I've said before, the application is automatically saved every 2 seconds, though as recommended, please have another copy of your application to hand. So we do get asked if institutions can apply simultaneously for other funding streams in addition to Key Action 2 under the same call. The answer is yes, and as you could see on the portal website, there are 2 separate forms for the other Key Action. However, the projects must address completely different objectives and involve different organisations, and you really need to consider your organisational and funding capacity also. So application submission, as I said, you'll not be able to click the submit button until all sections of the web form are complete. You'll receive a confirmation upon submitting the application. You should submit your application only when you're happy with the finalised version. There is a bit of time before the deadline. If you've applied a little bit of time before, you can return to your already submitted application, correct and resubmit. All applications are first checked for eligibility. So applications that are eligible are then taken on for further assessment before an award decision is made. And applicants will receive a notification of awarded decision approximately 5 months after the submission deadline. Now that notification is likely to fall within school holidays, so please consider what contact details you're using. And again, we will only accept the latest submission before the deadline. So to conclude, I'd like to remind you of the support that the UK National Agency will be offering in the run-up to the Key Action 2 deadline for schools. So to apply for funding, you'll need to complete and submit an application form in advance of the deadline. Please review the separate application form guidance videos for Key Action 229 and Key Action 201. They should be live by the end of this week, so I will send you a link to the Erasmus Plus YouTube channel. You can also review our application guidance, as these documents are extremely important for supporting you through the application process. And we will also be running a series of one-to-one support calls where you'll be able to ask any project or application specific queries, though again, please be advised, we're only able to give generic application advice and nothing project specific. So what I'd like to do is, just before we finish and you can continue with your questions, is just have a little bit of feedback from you if possible. So let me just go to the next one, and it'd be really great to know really how you rate the your satisfaction with today's webinar, how useful it's been for you guys. So if you can let us know, that'd be great. Oh, that's really great to know. Thank you ever so much for your feedback. We greatly appreciate that. I'm just going to put up here our contact details. We'll leave this on whilst we leave the webinar going for you to ask any more questions and get your answers. And thank you ever so much for attending, and best of luck with all your applications.